that the United States and the West would rearm whom? Yeah, rearm Germany and send them back. We got right to here, didn't we? What we lump it together, even though it's obviously more dramatic in this, but where Stalin not only killed so many of his enemies, but millions would die industrializing the Soviet Union. What do we call that? His what? Well, the 5-year plan was the economics plan. Yeah, the purchase. We just, even though it's a little more complex than that, we want to kind of narrow it down to something we can remember. And so, the Truman Doctrine was this. We got the Stalin, we got containment, good. What Truman did is, he went to Congress, and in 46, who controls Congress? What party? Yeah, Republicans, for the first time since 1930, Democrats then would win, and Democrats would control Congress all the way until 1981. But to be a brief little bit, but conservative Republicans and conservative Democrats, very isolationist, but they were anti-communist. And so what Truman did is he gave a speech that would set foreign policy up for the next 70 years. Here is him giving the speech, except the basis of policy is not a law, but it's to get money, 400 million for Greece and Turkey. And what he did was, he knew conservatives could have cared less about what's happening in Greece. One thing about conservatives, it's more isolationist. But he had to scare them. So he gave a speech where he said, if we don't help Greece defeat the communists, we're letting Stalin win. They will take over their enemies, and we are next. We'll be fighting in the streets of Casper, Wyoming to defend our way of life. So, with that, it worked. He scared the pants off of people. He said and laid it out so clear that this is all part of a massive communist conspiracy to take over the world. And these are the main factors of it. Oh, almost forgot. You notice? Turkey. There was no communist revolution in Turkey. But Truman implied there was or might be. And so we got to make sure Turkey is protected. Why? Right here. Russia has wanted this since the 17th century. Since before Peter the Great. They fought many wars to get this. To keep the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles so they didn't have access to the country. And so Turkey they lumped in, implying that there's a communist revolt there, and there wasn't. Kemal Ataturk had killed all the communists. But these are the main factors of the Truman Doctrine. Communism is not like other threats. It's not a country we're fighting. It's an idea, and it's a belief. And that's what makes it so scary. And not only that, it's indivisible. You know what indivisible means? By Montana state law, all high school students have to do the Pledge of Allegiance once a month, or once a week. In elementary schools, every day. That's the state law. And it's to show that we're, and as we all know, if you're not completely loyal to the country, you try to say the Pledge of Allegiance and you roll out. That's me, facetious. But, you said that? One country, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What is indivisible? Oh, that's indivisible. Meaning, all Americans are all together. Why? Meaning, all communists are all together. Meaning, one communist is the same as another communist, regardless of where they're at. So a communist in Greece is the same as a communist in China. That's the same as a communist in France. It's the same as a communist in Montana. And especially the same as that one communist in the Kremlin. They're all the same. What's that? Have I seen anybody blow up? Well, let's put it this way. It's been messy a few times. So that, number two, why is this a threat? You might have heard it called the domino theory, but George Keenan called it the domino effect. When one country falls, they will destabilize their neighbors. That will encourage revolt. It's implied that all the communists have to do is, okay, once we take Greece, it'll be like a disease. It'll spread across the Ionian Sea, and that's, you know, Italy's communist. Then boom, France, then Britain, and then Wyoming. Like a row of dominoes. Now, of course, that ignores that every country has unique issues. But if you start going into the complexities of the political situation in Greece, especially when we'll be supporting a really brutal military dictatorship, then it gets complex. That's not going to scare everybody. If we don't beat them in Greece, we'll be fighting on the shores of the United States. And that's what he said. And that's a massive exaggeration. And then, how does this work? We have a bipolar world. There's only us versus them, the United States versus the Soviet Union. And everything is all centered on that conflict, the US versus the Soviet Union. We're not helping the Greeks fight Greek communists. We're fighting communism directed from Stalin. So we're not really fighting. It's not about Greece. It's about the wider war against the communists. And therefore, every battle can be waged that way. And you see maps. They would not be, they shouldn't have done this orange and green. I know they want to go different. And all the maps when I was a kid growing up, they would be, this wouldn't be orange. What color was it? And what color is this? Blue versus red. Exactly. A simple world. You don't have to think now, do you? It's so easy. It's either us, and if they're against us, they're the enemy and they're the communists. Regardless of the actual nature of the struggle. Yeah.
Is that what was going through Stalin's head, except vice versa? Or
in a different way. But yeah, he saw this massive plot to get him. And to be clear about it, it wasn't like this for Stalin either. And then, once you come up with the idea that it's all part of a massive fight, that means that every battle, everything we do is actually being directed from the Kremlin, the capital in Moscow. That means that if there's a revolt, a reform movement that we might see threatens American interests. This would be a big deal when we get to Iran or Central America. Maybe even labor unions. Remember the bomb-throwing anarchists thing? It could be, or I'm sorry, it is directed by Stalin. Therefore, every fight is really a fight against Stalin, and if we allow them to win everywhere, we're giving into aggression, and we'll have another what? World. What do you call though the giving into aggression? The cities? Oh, Munich, another Munich. And that's where, and so all of this revolves around the idea that we're allowing this to happen like another Yalta too. And isn't this easy? I have to think now. It's all based upon that. So all we got to do is think about everything being started from Stalin. In fact, we had this vision of Stalin with his pipe and like a big map of the world. And actually, he did have it, but it was much more complex than this. But he was like popping on his pipe, walking around saying, okay, today we'll have the revolution in Greece. And then we'll have one in China. And then we'll have one in Guatemala. And then maybe a labor strike in France. All pecking away, like he's ordering it all. Every single issue is with the order from the Soviet Union. And therefore, we don't stop them in Greece, they're going to take everywhere. And this would become the basis of American foreign policy for 70 years. Now do the math, 70 years, this is 1948, meaning till right now. This is still the basis of American foreign policy. This very simple, it's not nuanced at all. It's us versus them. It avoids all the complexity of the world. All you have to know is we are good and they are bad. In fact, what they would say over and over again was the enslaved world versus the free world. Communism versus democracy. And we're fighting for democracy by hating really brutal military dictatorships. And this cartoon is Stalin. And these are all little dials, and they're various country names, and he's like clicking them. Going to the today, now, Albania. So much like the map. And so that's fitting with this idea. And everybody's in the State Department now. Everyone who's ever done that, they got their training in the Truman Doctrine. In fact, you take out one word. You take out communist and replace it with one word, and you have today's foreign policy. Terrorism. Terrorism. And that's why we're involved in 12 different countries, bombing or fighting right now. Just read about what the 47 strikes in Somalia in the last month. And thus implying that terrorists in Afghanistan are the same as terrorists in Somalia. Actually, no. Just the same as political issues in Greece have nothing to do with the political issues in Italy after the war, or for that matter, France, or for that matter, Wyoming. Every country is unique and has unique issues, but this simply says, hey, it's all part of a wider war. And it worked in the short run. They got the $400 million. Congress was scared. And everything would change. Everything changed. That moment, the United States will have a different country. Yeah.
In the comic on the bottom, who's in the picture of it?
Huh?
In the bottom right. Who's
You know, I don't know. Oh, it's Marx.
Okay.
So, new precedent. This setup, there's two big shifts. First off, the U.S. got great credibility in World War II, fighting against tyranny. And the U.S. claimed, like in World War I, we're fighting for democracy. And yet, we totally abandoned democracy. Democracy is not important. Not letting countries decide their own fate, or letting countries decide their own fate is not as important as fighting communists. And we would fight dictators as long as they're what? Anti. Within 10 years after the war, the United States is sending military aid to fascist Spain. We lost almost 300,000 men fighting the fascists, and now we're helping them. And one more thing, this became very much a military operation. Keenan's plan was to show that democracies and regulated capitalism was a much better system than what the communists had. But what this turned into was military. Because once you scare everybody, it's like, well, we better send weapons. That's step number one to stop the communists. And right away, this is a big shift. The U.S. has never had a large peacetime military. Now it kind of looks like we're going to. And arms manufacturers, the big companies that made the weapons, they can do the math. As long as people are terrified in a Cold War, they sell more planes. They sell more tanks. They're going to become much more involved politically than ever before. And this is a great cartoon. By the way, put that on there. That's something about that. This is going to be that the United States is going to become kind of a permanent military power. But one more thing. This is a great card. This isn't as good. It says Age of Turkey and Greece. It is Uncle Sam, New American Foreign Policy. So this is from 1948. And what's happening? Yeah, we have no idea what this is going to lead to. None. Truman is thinking short-term, scare people, get the money. He's an old-time political operative. That's what you do. You make a deal, you get your bill passed. But now he has changed everything by not only terrifying people, but greatly exaggerating the Soviet threat. Dramatically. Now he said, we are in trouble and might be taken unless we do this. How do you go back? Well, one more big thing will come out of this. The credibility of the United States will be in trouble. Because all through this time, we are going to claim we're fighting for the free world. And we are fighting for democracy over capitalism. I'm sorry, did I say democracy over capitalism? Democracy over communism, whatever those things might mean. And yet we're helping military dictatorships all over. So Spain, Portugal, Greece, and in Asia, dictatorships all over Latin America. But the place this is really going to hurt American credibility. Where we say we're for democracy, yet promote dictatorships, anybody know what region of the world? Huh? Latin America will be a big problem, but they have even more issues down the road in another area. The Middle East. Where we will support some of the most brutal dictatorships in the world, claiming we're fighting for democracy. And this will come back to bite us, where America's going to seem like hypocrites. Going to seem like somebody who wants something else, just to take advantage of them, to steal from them. This would be, in 1948, we helped overthrow democracy in Syria, and the biggie would be in Iran in 1953. And we are still in the middle of the effects of that, acting like one thing and going for something else. And most Americans didn't see it because they just didn't know enough about what was going on. But there's something else too. This is around the world. Once you say politically that we must stop communism everywhere, and if we don't, we might fall. What happens the next time? The next time, and the next time. If Truman, the next time something comes up, says, you know, maybe we shouldn't go send troops to China because that'll lead to a World War III, what will his opponents say? Munich, commies, you're letting them win. And that's where we get probably the biggest thing about the Truman Doctrine. It would change domestic politics to this day. Once you scare everybody, once you scare that, and say we must contain communism, then every politician in both parties will be desperate to show that they will contain communism, aka they can't look soft on communism. They will get politically hammered. Truman said, we must gear everything up to stop them. Stop them in Greece. But what happens if it's China? It's amazing, just 3 years after the Truman Doctrine, how ratcheted up the fear got that the United States will soon have over 300,000 troops fighting in South Korea. And most Americans could not have found it on a map. In fact, it wasn't even a country yet when the Truman Doctrine came about. And 50,000 Americans are going to die. And that is just the beginning. If we pull out of Korea, we'll be soft on communism. And they'll lose for re-election. And so everybody's got to look tough. And here's the thing, remember what I told you. It's mostly Democrats who are in office still. There'll be a Republican President Eisenhower, but then there'll be 2 more Democratic presidents. Congress controlled by Democrats. Republicans, they were the minority party. So they began what's called red baiting. Red baiting is accusing your opponents of being communists, and this was mostly Democrats because the Democrats had the presidency in Congress and had been in power for so long. And they could say the Democrats were soft at Yalta. They were soft at Potsdam. They allowed all of this to happen. They allowed the Soviets to get stronger. And what happened was the Democrats had no effective answer except for to do what? Get tougher on communism and blame the Republicans for not being tough enough. And so everybody's got to prove now we're tougher. Build up and expand more. And it's no coincidence that right after this happened, the second Red Scare in McCarthyism, which we'll talk about that tomorrow, and military spending exploded. And here's the thing about military spending I want you to get down. Increasing military spending was how you showed you were tough on communism. You see, I'm building more weapons. I must be tough on communism. Truman could say, even though it's a bomb, everyone say he didn't need, Truman would build a super, have the U.S. build a super. We call it the hydrogen bomb today. Too big for any real use, but it shows you're tough on communism. Soon we'll build enough weapons to destroy the world over 1,000 times over. But if you don't build them, you're soft on communism. We would build weapon systems that had no real useful value. Some would be horrific weapon systems we find out in Vietnam. But we built them. Heck, they spent millions of dollars on this high-speed bomber that would fly 3 times the speed of sound and carry a 40-megaton nuclear weapon. And it was a disaster, worthless, it crashed. But we spent all that money. Thankfully, we would never do that kind of thing today. And it goes on to this day. We have a massive increase in defense spending, one of the largest in history this next year. And nobody really knows why, what we're spending it for. We're building weapon systems that aren't very good, like the F-35 fighter that crash all the time. Japan just lost one. They're only $250 million a piece, so it's not that big a deal. But that's me being facetious again. Same deal. Now we got to be tough on terrorism. This is huge. You want to know where we became a militarized country? It's right here. And click. Here's the domino theory. Here's Stalin going, I was friends with the big 3. Now I'm public enemy #1. Get it? No. Don't do that. Why is it doing this?
Where's the little dot?
Here are a couple things. Show how rapid anti-communism began to go. Here we have, as we all know, rock and roll music, all a bunch of commies. Well, this was pretty pervasive. One of the most militaristic presidents in our history, even though he was also one of the most liberal. Cold War is an interesting thing. John Kennedy, this was put up all over this very liberal president because he did not blow up the world in the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. These signs were all over Dallas, Texas in 1962. November 22nd, they're put on like power or like telephone poles and things like that, all along this route where Kennedy came through. Been in Dealey Plaza that same day he'd be assassinated by Harvey Oswald. They accused him basically of being. It's actually crazy. But two big things came out of this. First off, you have two paths now the U.S. is going to go. And we'll take most of the military, but one will be aid. It's called the Marshall Plan, named after Truman's third Secretary of State right there, George Marshall. And it would be a massive aid program for Europe. But it would turn out to be only Western Europe because Stalin didn't want any strings attached. But not only was it Western Europe, we would begin to rebuild, this is Berlin, and we helped rebuild at least the Allied occupation areas of Germany, soon to be called West Germany. And in a separate bill, but I put it in there to give you an idea of how things change, we also helped rebuild Japan to make sure there won't be that kind of problems after World War I. And they asked for $50 billion, they got $12 billion. And you might think, wait a second, that's a bad deal. Well, that's pretty close to what Truman and Marshall wanted. But you ask for more than what you want, then you deal, then that's how you make deals. Exactly. And it was basically three reasons. I think you can get humanitarian, also anti-communist. If you begin to rebuild these areas that are absolutely devastated by war, give people jobs and security, they don't revolt. People with full stomachs don't revolt. But also, most of those countries, like when France began to rebuild, they'll buy products from the United States, and this would boost the American economy. Now, think about foreign policy-wise, the humanitarian argument or the anti-communist argument. Think about foreign policy-wise. Which one would appeal to conservatives? That's appeal to conservatives, appeal to liberals, and it passed. This is, without a doubt, one of the most successful programs in American history. At least in the short run, would boost American credibility. Then it would begin to tank again in the late 1950s. And it worked. They called it the European miracle. And what Japan would do, after being devastated by the war, was an absolutely remarkable recovery. And in many ways, the pump was primed with U.S. money. Now, this might have problems for trade and various things down the road, but it was incredibly successful. And we're going to jump right to here. But on the other track is the military one. One of the most important laws in history that affects us to this very day is the National Security Act. And there's Truman citing it. Gee, I wonder what kind of people ran our country back then. So, it just really struck me. So, and by the way, gray suits with style. What would change gray suits being in style? TV. Black and white TV, they just look gray. But, Department of Defense. We had a separate War Department, which was the Army, and Navy Department. They combined those and created a new branch of the Armed Forces. What was it? The Air Force. The thought was all the different branches, the three branches, they combined them into one Department of Defense, there'll be no more inter-service rivalries for money and men and equipment. No, of course not. Now it's just three entities scrambling for it. And the Marines are part of what branch? Maybe. And they'd love to hear that. And the big thing was they all wanted nuclear weapons. All of them. Some of the things the Army made, maybe I'll have to show you the Davy Crockett. You would not believe these weapons. But not only that, so once you create this massive defense apparatus, which is now growing, we have to know now where the communists are. if we're going to be committed all over the world, we need spies, aka the CIA. Never had anything like this before. There was military intelligence, but not the same. And a massive intelligence analysis operation called the NSA. Now the NSA is the biggest intelligence operation in the world. We have no idea how many people they have, how much money they spend. We have no idea. That is all secret. They call it dark money. They just basically, Congress just budgets them money, and then they do with it as they please. It's, yeah, we're talking, it's in the billions. It's really not clear. These are actually spies. You know, these are the people that would go to other countries. I should add, make sure you get this down. This has to be outside the borders of the U.S. They're technically not supposed to spy in the borders of the United States. Now I know what you're thinking. Can they spy? That's another story. And if, let's say there's we're tracking somebody in France and they contact someone in the U.S. That is a gray area. Who will be the domestic spies? The FBI. Great place to finish. Tomorrow we go to war. Oh, how about the DVDs? Don't glare at me. Yeah. Really good, really bad. Well, there's some, everybody did really good in the documents, getting outside information overall was not as good as it should. But some people did really well. But you had to have, you know, like at least some examples like Iwo Jima or Okinawa, kamikazes. If you didn't believe the emperor, they want to keep the emperor that was term with the Soviets in Eastern Europe. Those kind of things that would have been very beneficial. Huh? No, it's bad. It's really bad. No.
What you said it's gonna make you go?
No.
It was actually
No.
It's bad.
I didn't even see that.
Kirsten's gonna cry. I didn't know. I think it's gonna go. I did just think it go. One of the most.
Oh, right. Chico said to them how it started all the plans going out.
That's true. I was like, I moved out. Yeah, Catholics. No, she's gotta be too religious.
Aesthetic is dangerous.
It's a flaming fire.
Oh, yeah.
The fridge just came out.
I did not hear it too early today. I just didn't.
So, how do you feel about Notre Dame?
How do you think I feel?
Quite bad.
Pretty proud.
Don't mess up and
That is.
Yeah. I don't know all the seniors.
Okay.
But I haven't seen them next one. Yeah, we're only freshmen this year.
I know it's like,
I used to see it. I don't know. I see Thank you.
That is true. No, they were yeah, please.
Probably typed up what you like for like acting. We have like all these years, they all have a bunch of names. It's like a race.
I think it's small pockets after. Yeah, it's in. But
Yeah, I know.
So anyway,
Oh, okay. You're gonna control me.
and then just, you know, it makes
All right. Couple things in real fast. Yeah, I did not.
I like how McDonald's is the background of your slides.
Yeah, it's not for here, but yeah.
Very American.
I like to keep it complicated, which means I'm not